with the Investing News Network. I'm Scott Tibbles, and today I'm having another chat with Remi Piet, who is Senior Director at America's Market Intelligence. Thank you for joining me, Remi.
Hi, Scott. How are you doing today?
Fantastic, and it's always a pleasure to have a chat. So today we're going to have another look at a Caribbean country in Latin America, but really it's a French country. So this is French Guiana. It is part of France. There are quite a lot of miners operating there. One of the big ones is Toronto-listed Columbus Gold. They have a 45% stake in Montagne d'Or, which is a large gold mining project there. So I've already mentioned that French Guiana is, of course, part of France, which means that French politics looms large in Latin America and this country. So what can you tell me about what is unique, besides that, about French Guiana and for mining companies operating there?
Well, French Guiana is fairly unique, obviously, because it's the one European territory in Latin America, so it has to abide by a series of European regulations. These has pros and cons. Obviously, the stability of these regulations, the fact that you have a very strong rule of law, that you have a series of welcoming, institutions and well organized power centers in the country that you can rely on much more than other potentially more up and coming jurisdiction in Latin America. The negative are obviously the fact that it's you have to be extremely professional when operating in French Guiana. You also have to be very well understanding of the strength of environmental NGOs, the strength of the interest of a series of economic actors in the territory. But being, as I said, the European jurisdictions, you have to see the operations in French Guiana as much as if you were opening a mine in another European country. French Guiana is part of France and therefore part of the European Union. However, this being said, when you look at French Guiana, you have to understand French Guiana has 4 different layers of decision makings and potential influence. The first one is obviously in Paris. Decision-making powers are shared between the Ministry of the Développement Durable, so sustainable development, or the Ministry of the Overseas Territories, and all this is obviously controlled by the presidency of President Macron. Macron, even when he was economy minister, was very supportive of mining in French Guiana, sees mining as a way to structure and formalize a series of economic development in a territory that is being plagued by unemployment and costs a certain amount of money to France. So therefore, we're looking at different options. The country is looking at different options for developing the territory. French Guiana is also home of the French spatial program, so that's where all the satellites are being sent to space from Kourou in French Guiana. But the capacity of these developments to bring employment to a large scale of the population is slightly limited, as opposed to potential formal industrial mining and the impact it will have in trickling down in terms of creating jobs and economic development in the rest of the territory. So obviously that level of power in Paris has been a level that has been addressed by miners in French Guiana, but it's although it's supportive of mining, generally the political game in Paris, especially with the rise of environmentalist parties, Europe Écologie, the deals that Macron has to make, especially with his center-left political parties in the moment of pension reform and so on, has led to the fact that there has been a series of compromise and moving back on the series of engagement and support, at least informal support, to industrial mining in French Guiana. But that's the first level of political influence. The second level is obviously, if I look at French Guiana, is the series of still positive and supportive of mining. It's a series of political actors in French Guiana, or whether especially in the western part of French Guiana, that are pro-mining, that are looking at potentially trying to get a reform and a better conditions to support mining in French Guiana that be a little less controlling than the European regulations, and saying that potentially French Guiana should also be seen as a Latin American jurisdiction with this unique sets of rules and and limitation. Therefore, there should be a better, let's say, annex to the mining code that is going to be passed. There's going to be a new mining code coming in 2020 in France, and that will actually address the situation in French Guiana. The third level, which is much more anti-mining, is the large, let's say, some might say deep state in French Guiana, but it's the representative of the French state, a large amount of civil servants that serve in French Guiana for 3 to 6 years potentially, with very good salary conditions, because you get a better salary if you actually are far away from Paris. And they see their presence in French Guiana as a mission to protect biodiversity and to protect the ecosystems, and they don't have the consideration of long-term development of French Guiana, and I understand that their position of trying to make a difference in the world in the environmentally minded, but the idea is that, well, it's easy to say that for 3 or 6 years and then leave back to France and leave French Guiana in a state of underdevelopment, but they have to be reckoned with, they have to be understood. There's a large element of red tape and time and delays in the environmental assessments and authorization. So you have to understand this level of power. And the fourth one is obviously the communities, indigenous communities, and the economic powers in French Guiana. The economic powers are fairly limited. There are some local players, some companies that exist, especially in local mining companies. There are also some potential alliances that could be built with other key investors in French Guiana. There are some very wealthy French people that now live in French Guiana because it's a great weather and great conditions to live there. But they have to be addressed and they have to be reached out to. The communities, in terms of the indigenous communities themselves, they would gain from formal employment in the mining industry, but some of them are also gaining from informal mining, the garimpeiros, the traffics. We're looking at a frontier with Suriname that is one of the key drug trafficking frontier in Latin America or the Caribbean. But you have to understand and reach out to them. It's a work that probably has not been sufficiently well by traditional actors and Canadian actors, where they were trying to develop Montagne d'Or being 45% owned by Columbus Gold, but also 55% by Norgold, so a Russian company. And the capacity to interact with the local communities was probably did not lead to any much success, let's put it this way, and led to the entire territory seeing Montagne d'Or as a project that is too big, not enough integrated into the territory, and should be rejected. That doesn't mean that there's no future to mining in French Guiana. I actually believe that there is, and we're becoming fairly bullish on French Guiana. First of all, Columbus Gold has other projects, Maripa, Rea. Those are projects that are a little further along in their they will take more time to actually arrive to production, but there are some clear potential in those two projects, and they actually operate them in conjunction with IAMGOLD rather than Norgold. And there's clearly a change of strategy in Columbus Gold of having a much more, let's say, bottom up approach of socializing those projects ahead of time and try to build a better strategy in terms of license to operate in the country. IAMGOLD is there also. Newmont is there. Newmont is working with Mine Espérance from CME, which is a local actor in French Guiana. So there are ways to move forward. I've talked to the different ministerial actors in December in Paris. I've talked to different actors in French Guiana also. The key dates here are the new mining code that will arrive probably before this summer. That should be supportive of mining in French Guiana. We've seen some key development, especially the authorization to the cyanide processing plant next to the Eau Plata project in French Guiana. So those are fairly positive. But you have to understand, as I said, those different 4 layers of decision making and how to both mitigate the negative impact of overzealous civil servants that do not understand the comprehensive element of mining as a key to development in the territory. You have to reach out to communities in a humble and full of empathy way, one way or another, to integrate your project. You have to work with local political actors, especially at a time when you have municipal elections coming in French Guiana, and you have to work in Paris. And the fact that most mining companies have worked only in Paris and maybe less so in the territory has limited the capacity of mining developments in French Guiana.
And speaking of the layers of power, where does the EU come into it? Does it come into it?
Well, it comes into it in terms of the quality of the regulations, in terms that the French regulations over mining have to abide a series of European regulations. But there's no EU representative in French Guiana. The state representative, so the prefect, or there's actually it's called Monsieur Mine as his nickname. It's a person that has been nominated to work on mining development in French Guiana. All these answer to the French state and therefore the Macron presidency, and this abides by a series of European regulations, like any kind of economic activity in a French or European territory.
Okay, so there's quite a lot of layers. So we've just been talking about layers of power and what to work through. Where would an investor need to start when they're looking at this territory?
So if you're an up-and-coming investor, again, if you're looking at taking some larger equity position or shares of an existing company, you have to be very careful of your counterparty risk assessment and looking at what has been achieved over the last few years and what are the main areas of risks or the absence of vector of alliance or capacity to move forward the project because you made a series of enemies or you didn't have implemented the right strategy there. That you have to do a very strong due diligence before doing this. If you're looking at partnering with a company in French Guiana or being a new investor being an up-and-coming junior mining company that wants to start bidding for concession, you have to keep in mind first of all that all concessions will have to be renewed with a new mining code. And so right now we're in a situation of a little bit of a regulatory limbo ahead of that mining code. But you have, as I said, if you're a new player in French Guiana, you have to be very well organized in liaising with the four, let's say, Congress representative. There's two senators and two congressmen. Three of them are fairly, supportive of mining. The other one, Gabriel Serville, is against it. You have to, obviously have some kind of a presence in Paris to be able to understand the measures in a different ministerial circle, whether it's the Ministry of the Economy or Ministry of Développement Durable or overseas territory. And that's where your project will be successful or not. More than anything, you have to understand the different economic layers in French Guiana to be able to build a narrative of how your mining project is going to be a vector of development in French Guiana. There's a series of economic actors that have never been reached out to, or very limitedly reached out to, or that do not understand how a well-regulated mining project will actually create jobs or will be in a better interest economically of the territory, and that the promises of so-called green jobs that we've seen already when IM Gold faced an incapacity to move forward with this project in Concaïman, and the rhetoric was this: there will be a series of green jobs that will be created. Those never happened. Other alternative for development, which is, for example, the agro-industry and so on, also have strong environmental impact. And the key problem, and that's where you have to move this narrative in French Guiana if you want to protect the Amazonian forest, for example, which is the number one criteria from environmentalist organization, is to fight against illegal mining. And we're seeing most of the damages in the Amazon forest is led by a series of criminal miners getting paydos from Brazil, for example, or miners that cross the Surinamese frontier, or even present already in French Guiana, and these needs to be cracked down. How do you crack down on this? Well, you need to have sources of financing. This comes from royalties, and this comes from economic development, and so on. That argument needs to be made. That argument needs to be well relayed, and therefore counterbalance the argument of no to mining in French Guiana because of Amazon forest. It's actually not that simple. This is the classic, no a la amenaza a la vida that we can hear about in Latin America. But there has to be a strong, ambitious approach to this with academic actors, with local economic actors, with journalistic actors in the territory and in Paris to be able to bring these arguments to light and therefore change the balance of the game on this one. There are ways to do it, but so far, Columbus Gold or other actors in French Guiana have not been able to play well the game. Whether it's IM Gold, Newmont is just starting in French Guiana, and there has to be a severe investment in that level.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so I'd like to touch on the environmental side of things, but before we get to that, so you've said that there's new mining code coming up, and you've said that the indications are that it could be positive for mining in French Guiana. How do we know that? Have we had leaks of information? Have they been telling us exactly what they've been going to be doing?
Well, I know that because I actually talked to the different people that put together the reform mining code that will be presented to Macron and then forwarded by Congress. So I do have good information on what's going to be in there. But the idea here is that Macron has the majority in Congress, so he can pass a new mining code. The new mining code that we're having that is about to be submitted is a mining code that tackles not only obviously gold mining in French Guiana. This is just one of the issues, but it also tackles issues of shale gas or a series of other resources, part of French territory that are have a strong mining history, because there's not a lot of mining history in mainland France, but New Caledonia is also French territory. So that's, you're looking at other actors, Remi Piet and so on, in that territory. So it's a fairly comprehensive approach to mining. There is obviously an annex for territories such as New Caledonia and French Guiana. So French Guiana and New Caledonia, on top of that, don't have the similar administrative ruling of Paris. But the issue here is that we're going to see a series of clearer processes in terms of receiving environmental and social licensing. This will happen at the moment of the granting of the concession. Now I'm saying is, I've seen drafts. Will it be changed until the Friday pass Congress? That might be, I can't sign on this, but I was fairly and quite impressed by the changes that will happen, and they will therefore include, at the moment of the granting of a concession, a series of measures and commitments to make sure that these projects are integrated inside the creation of value of the territory and playing with different actors, and therefore will limit the litigation that happened afterwards when you have to renew a series of different authorization for water use or for electricity and so on. So that will be a game changer. You will have, as I said, first of all, because that's in the texts, then you have to build clear alliances and understanding with different actors locally, so you don't have demonstrations to the level that we've seen against Montagne d'Or, and that you're able to really educate and communicate about your own project.
Okay, and so touching back on the environmental side of things, so you don't really hear all that much coming out of French Guiana about the environmental things, but you've mentioned bureaucrats from metropolitan France going there and having a bit of a sort of protector culture. Is there a lot of pressure socially within France to treat French Guiana like some kind of national park, or what's the situation?
Well, you don't have a lot of environmental damages thanks to mining, because there's very lack of scrutiny on illegal mining, which you would hear much more about it if there was a capacity to really track them down and in the middle of the Amazon forest and show the negative impact on the environment. In terms of regulating mining, the developments existing are very small today, so it's small scale mining, and therefore there's not a lot of use. But obviously the debate is whether or not there should be industrial mining in French Guiana. Whether France, I say we because I'm French, but whether France is planning on having French Guiana as let's say an environmental park, this is not the desire of the French Guyanese themselves. French Guyanese do not want to be the amusement park of the French, going for a couple of years to work as civil servants and then leaving. There is a strong historical presence of mining. The Mine Saint-Élie, for example, is a mine that has been around for more than a century. So mining is part of the culture of local Guyanese on different places. They want to have development, they want to have quality of life. So they want to make sure that it is sound operators that operate in French Guiana, but they do not want to be seen as the Indian reserve, if I put it this way, with lack of development. Keep in mind, when you're talking about French Guiana, you're talking about territory that went on regional strikes, not a general strike, just ahead of 2017 elections when Macron got elected. That had a huge amount of press coverage, because obviously French press is present in French Guiana and covers this with a specific TV network, and then journalists are there and so on. And so there were already demands for more development in the territory, saying we are French, we deserve to have access to good quality infrastructure, education, and so on, that costs money. So either you find sources of revenues inside the territory, or you're basically receiving money from Paris and costs a lot of money to Paris. So you have to find an element of balance towards this. That's why I believe that there will continue to be support from Paris to industrial development in French Guiana. The mining being one of those options, mining being an option that will see light if there's a way to coordinate and make sure that you help Paris, the governments understand, build some kind of alliances with anti-mining actors in Paris, or at least, give them the arguments about how your project is different from, the myth that are being, transmitted about projects from 50 years ago, or the impact on the environment and so on. So you have to really work properly on your social license to operate, on your EIA and so on, and have it publicized. But once you have this, and with the support of the local actors and with the capacity to socialize with the actual communities around the mining site, I see strong potential for a mining project. But this has to be done seriously, especially because it's in European territory and the scrutiny is so high on it.
It is also a European territory that, just looking at a list of French departments by HDI, French Guiana is the lowest ranked within France. So one could argue that, of course, the local residents very much have a point.
Yes, I mean, there's a lack of economic development in the country. There's a commitment from the state to invest in infrastructure, but the commitment, this will be another topic ahead of the 2022 elections. What I'm seeing, let's be honest, what I'm seeing is that we're going to get a better mining code implemented this year, or at least voted on this year. A series of projects that will be able to be ramped up before the 2022 elections. And if Macron wins the 2022 elections, and I'm fairly bullish on this, because there's no real alternative right now in France, then there's a series of authorization that will be given in 2022, 2023. So I would encourage investors to look at it. I would look at projects continuing exploration and their production be able to see light in 2022, 2023.
Fantastic. Well, I think that we will leave it there then. Thank you so much for giving us an update on the situation in French Guiana, Remi.
Thank you very much, Scott.
And that was Remi Piet, Senior Director at America's Market Intelligence. I'm Scott Tibbles with the Investing News Network. You can find us at investingnews.com and feel free to follow us at Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Thanks for listening.